The night my son threw me out of his house, I was making chamomile tea, not packing, not arguing, not doing anything that deserved what came next. Just standing at the stove in a worn navy flannel shirt, waiting for the water to boil, thinking about nothing in particular, the way a man does when he's lived long enough to know that the quiet moments are the ones worth holding on to. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate. The footsteps of a man who has rehearsed something and is finally ready to say it. I didn't turn around. I already knew. My name is Nolan Drake. I'm 63 years old. I built a regional logistics company from $4,000 in a rented warehouse in Cincinnati, ran it for 19 years, and sold it for a number that made my accountant need to sit down before he finished reading it. I've buried a wife, raised 4 children, outlasted 2 recessions, 1 lawsuit, and a tax audit that went on so long the IRS agent assigned to my case got promoted twice before it was over. I am not a man who was easily rattled, but I want to be honest with you about something right here at the beginning of this story before we go any further. The hardest thing I ever did was not building that company. It wasn't burying Corinne, though God knows that broke something in me that is never fully healed. The hardest thing I ever did was stand in my son's kitchen at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in November, listen to him say what he said, and choose, deliberately, consciously, with every year of my 63 behind that choice, to say nothing back, because what I had to say was going to change everything. And some things deserve to land at the right moment, not before. Let me take you back 8 months. February, a hospital room in Columbus that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. A doctor with a careful expression, the kind doctors develop after years of delivering news they can't soften, sitting across from me and saying the words "moderate cardiac episode" in the tone of a man reading from a script he's read many times before, suggested I not live alone for a while. My son Sloan was there, 38 years old, broad-shouldered. Corinne's eyes, my stubbornness, a combination that has never once worked in anyone's favor, including his. He stood up from his chair before the doctor finished speaking. "Dad," he said, "come stay with us. We have the room. It's not a problem." He meant it. I want to be clear about that. On that February afternoon, in that hospital room, my son meant every word. What changed wasn't Sloan. What changed was the person waiting for him at home. Her name is Alara. They'd been married 2 years by the time I moved into their guest room on Ridgecrest Drive. She was warm to my face, always warm to my face, offered to cook my meals, asked about my health, smiled at all the right moments. But I'd spent 30 years in business watching people negotiate. I knew the difference between warmth and performance, and I'd noticed things. Small things at first. The way a phone call from my daughter would go unreturned for a week, then 2, then stop entirely. The way my youngest son Marcus, 40 minutes south in Circleville, stopped being invited to Sunday dinners without any explanation anyone could point to. The way Sloan's face had started doing something complicated when I mentioned any of his siblings. A slight tightening, a quick redirect, like a man who'd been told to change the subject and was trying to remember why. I'd seen this before, in boardrooms, in partnership disputes, in the slow, careful way one person can rewrite another person's reality, one small increment at a time. I started keeping notes, not because I was planning anything, because I'm a man who has always believed that information is the most valuable thing you can hold, and that you should never let anyone know you're holding it. 22 months, 47 pages in a manila folder in the drawer of the guest room nightstand, and 1 recording. Ohio is a single-party consent state, meaning one person in a conversation can legally record it without telling the other. In the spring of last year, Elara had a phone call in the kitchen while she thought I was working in the backyard. The kitchen window was open. I was on the back porch, completely still. The way I'd learned to be still in 63 years of watching things. I heard her say, "He's a senile old man bleeding Sloan dry. I'm handling it." I went inside and got my phone. She didn't hear me come in. I filed it, said nothing, waited. The brass clock in the hallway was ticking when Sloan came downstairs that November night. It's an antique. Corinne found it at a market in Savannah 17 years ago, picked it up with both hands in the middle of a crowded aisle and said, "Nolan, this one. This is the one." I didn't understand it at the time. I understood it at her funeral when I carried it out of our Cincinnati house because I physically could not leave it behind. That clock goes where I go. It was ticking in the hallway behind me while I stood at the stove. Steady, indifferent, keeping its own time regardless of what the rest of the room was doing. There's a lesson in that clock, but I wasn't thinking about lessons right then. Dad, Sloan stopped at the bottom of the stairs. We need to talk. Sure. I still didn't turn around. Tea's almost ready. You want some? A beat with rehearsal in it. This is serious. I turned around. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs with his jaw set and his eyes not quite finding mine. The specific look of a man who has been given lines he doesn't entirely believe and is concentrating on delivering them correctly. And there at the edge of the hallway, just inside the shadow where the kitchen light didn't quite reach, Alara, arms crossed. That particular stillness of hers, not passive, never passive. The stillness of a person who has set something in motion and is watching it move. Almost there, her face said. Almost. Okay, I said. Set down my mug. Talk. What came out of my son's mouth next? I am not going to soften it. There is no version of this story where I make those words smaller than they were. Get out of this house. His voice filled the kitchen. The clock ticked. My wife isn't comfortable having you here. Pack your things and be gone by morning. The room was completely quiet after that. Even the clock seemed to pause. I looked at my son. I looked at Alara. She was doing everything in her power not to let the smile reach her teeth. And I said nothing. Not one word. Sloan blinked. He prepared for this conversation, written both sides of it in his head, the way people do when they've been told how it's going to go. He'd prepared for the wounded father speech, the argument, the tears, the moment where I'd crumble and he'd feel terrible and she would comfort him and explain that it was necessary. He had not prepared for silence. Dad, did you hear me? I heard you. I said. I picked up my chamomile tea, walked past both of them, went to the guest room, closed the door, not slammed, closed. There's a difference that matters. Here is what people get wrong about quiet men. They see stillness and read it as surrender. They see a man who doesn't raise his voice and decide he has nothing left. They mistake patience for powerlessness. I lay in that guest bed, the stiff mattress, the window that rattled when the wind shifted, and I did not cry, did not rage, did not rehearse the things I should have said. I made a list, the way I always have before a significant decision. What do I have? What do they think I have? What is the gap between those two things? The gap, as it turned out, was approximately $12 million wide. Here is what Sloan knew about his father. Retired, widower, heart condition, drove a 2019 Camry, wore the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation, made chamomile tea at night and fell asleep watching old westerns before 10 o'clock. Here is what Alara had decided about his father. Burden, liability, drain, problem to be managed. Here is what neither of them knew. In 1987, a 24-year-old named Nolan Drake took $4,000 in savings, a handshake deal with a man he'd met twice, and an idea that everyone around him called stupid, and built it into a regional logistics company that operated across 6 states. Sold it 19 years later, reinvested quietly, built a land trust on 200 acres of Ohio farmland, acquired a minority stake in a mid-size investment group, lived modestly because Corinne and I had both come from nothing and never forgot what that felt like. And never, not once in 63 years, felt the need to explain any of it to anyone who hadn't earned the right to know. Corinne used to say, "Nolan, you should let people know what you've built." I'd say, "Why? So they treat me differently? I'd rather know how they treat me when they think I'm nobody." She'd laugh every time. Lord, I missed that laugh. What 63 years had taught me was this. The people worth keeping in your life don't need to know your net worth to treat you with dignity. The ones who do? That information is more useful as a test than a credential. Alara had just failed the test. Comprehensively. At 2 a.m. I got up, sat at the small desk in the corner of the guest room, opened my laptop, and called the one person on earth I trusted with everything. Everett, my attorney of 22 years. The man who drafted every contract, every trust document, every deed I'd signed since before Sloan was old enough to drive. A man who answered his phone at 2 a.m. not because he had to, but because he understood, after 22 years, that when Nolan Drake called at 2 a.m., it wasn't nothing. Nolan. His voice, gravel and composure. It's 2 in the morning. I know, I said. I need you to move on the foundation. A pause. How soon? Dawn. A longer pause. How bad was it? I looked at Kareen's clock. I'd moved it from the hallway to my nightstand the day I arrived. Couldn't leave it out there where anyone could just walk past it without knowing what it meant. Bad enough, I said. Start with the land trust. 200 acres. Then the Meridian stake. Then Everett. Call the others. The others. 3 numbers I hadn't dialed myself in close to 2 years. My second son in Portland. My daughter outside Austin. My youngest, Marcus, 40 minutes south in Circleville. The one who got his mother's laugh, and my stubbornness, which I've always said is the most dangerous combination I've ever encountered. 3 children who had, one by one, quietly faded from the picture. No single moment anyone could point to. No argument. No falling out. Just a slow, careful erosion. The kind that looks like drift until you understand it was direction. That's how Alara worked. Patient. Precise. Invisible until it was too late. Consider it done, Everett said. Then, Nolan, where are you going to go? I looked at the clock, listened to it tick. Somewhere I should have gone a long time ago, I said. By 5:30 a.m. I had 1 suitcase packed, the things that mattered. Kareen's clock, wrapped in a flannel shirt placed at the top so nothing could shift against it. 1 photograph, my laptop, and the manila folder. 47 pages. 22 months of dates and careful notes and 1 recording that was about to become very relevant to several people. I did not slam the front door. I did not write a note. I did leave one thing. A plain white envelope on the kitchen table. On the front, used as a label, a piece of paper in Corinne's handwriting, from a card she'd sent me years before she got sick. I'd carried that paper in my wallet since her funeral. I smoothed it flat with my thumb and left it where Sloan would eventually find it. Not that morning. He wouldn't find it that morning. Later, when it was already too late to stop what was coming. I pulled the front door closed behind me. Gray Columbus morning, November cold, the thorough kind that finds every gap in your code and reminds you it's there. The Camry started on the first turn. I backed out of the driveway without looking back. $12 million. A plan. And absolutely nothing left to prove to any living soul. Nobody prepares you for what freedom feels like at 63. Not the books, not the people who love you, not even the years you spend telling yourself you're fine when you aren't. I'll skip the poetry and just tell you what it actually felt like. It felt like taking the first full breath you've taken in 8 months and realizing, with the particular shock of something obvious arriving late, that you hadn't been breathing properly this whole time. Wednesday, 6:14 a.m. I checked into the Meridian House Hotel on Nationwide Boulevard with 1 suitcase and a coffee from the lobby cart and the specific calm of a man who has made a decision so large and so final that there's nothing left to be anxious about. Either it works or it doesn't. He's made his move. The board looks the way it looks. Room 1104, 11th floor. I set down the suitcase and did the one thing I always do when I arrive somewhere new. Unpacked Corinne's clock, set it on the nightstand, centered it, plugged it in, listened to it tick. There, I thought, that's the sound of a room becoming mine. Everett called at exactly 7 o'clock a.m. It's done, he said, before I got a word out. All of it, land trust transferred to the Kareen Drake Foundation. 5:52 a.m., legally airtight. The Meridian stake redirected effective this morning. He paused with the particular timing of a man who saves the best line for last. And Sloan is no longer the primary beneficiary on the life insurance policy, as of 6:08 a.m. I looked out the hotel window at Columbus waking up. Gray sky, cold streets, the city going about its Tuesday completely unbothered by what had just shifted 3 miles away in a house on a Bexley street. Good, I said. Make the calls. Now, before I go any further, I need to stop here for just a second. If you're watching this on Sweet Family Revenge and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do it now. Right now, while Everett is making calls and Corinne's clock is ticking in room 1104, It costs you nothing and it means everything to this channel. And then leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching this from. City, state, country, wherever you are in the world right now. This story started in a hallway in Columbus, Ohio at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, and I genuinely want to know how far it has traveled. Someone out there is watching this right now, thinking about their own family, their own letter they never wrote, their own brass clock sitting on someone else's shelf. Maybe that's you. Tell me where you are. We're going back to those calls in just a moment. You need to hear what Marcus said when Everett called him. Everett made 3 calls. He told me afterward what each of them said when they picked up. He's a discreet man, doesn't repeat things he hasn't been asked to. But I'd asked. I needed to know. My son in Portland answered on the second ring, heard Everett's name, and before Everett could finish a sentence, said, "Is Dad okay?" Not what does he want. Not why is someone's attorney calling me at 5 a.m. Just, is Dad okay? 3 words that told me everything about what the last 2 years had actually been, and what had never stopped being true underneath all of it. My daughter in Austin let Everett finish his full explanation without interrupting once, then was quiet for a moment, then said very quietly, "It's about time." Like a woman who had been standing at a door for 2 years waiting for someone to finally open it. And Marcus, my youngest, the one with Corinne's laugh and my stubbornness, had gone completely silent on the line when Everett told him what had happened, long enough that Everett thought the call had dropped. Then Marcus said, "Tell him I'm on the next flight." He didn't fly. He drove. 40 minutes down I-71 in the dark. He was knocking on my hotel room door by Thursday morning. I had to set my coffee down when Everett told me all of that. Just sat on the edge of the bed and set it down and didn't say anything for a long moment. 3 children who had been quietly removed from my life over 22 months. 3 phones answered at 6 a.m. as if no time had passed. As if the distance had never been real, because it hadn't been. It had been manufactured, and the moment Everett called, the manufacturing collapsed. That tells you everything about what had been lost, and everything about what had never actually left. Wednesday passed. Thursday too. I walked along the Scioto River Thursday afternoon, hands in my coat pockets, the November cold coming off the water the way Ohio cold does, finding every gap patient and thorough. I thought about Corinne the whole way. She would have hated this. I want to be honest about that. She hated conflict the way some people hate a particular sound. Physically, in her chest. She would have found the legal maneuvers cold. She would have said there had to be another way to reach Sloan. But Corinne was also the woman who had pulled me into the kitchen after our first Thanksgiving dinner with Ilara. 3 years ago, the house full of noise and conversation behind us, and said in the quiet, certain voice she reserved for things she knew absolutely, "Nolan, watch that one." She said it once. She never said it again. She didn't need to. I had watched. For 22 months I had watched, and noted, and documented. Every small cruelty served cold. Every family member quietly, methodically removed. Every lie planted in fertile ground and left to grow. The manila folder had 47 pages in it, and one recording that Ilara still didn't know existed. I was patient, Corinne, I thought, standing by the river. I was as patient as I knew how to be. Friday morning, Sloan called. I let it ring. He called 3 more times before noon. Each time I set the phone face down and went back to what I was doing. Not cruelty, necessity. Some conversations need the room they're going to happen in to be ready first. Some reckonings need to land before they can be spoken about. Let him understand the size of the room he's standing in. What Sloan was only just beginning to discover was the architecture Everett and I had built over several years. Quietly, without announcement. The business account he borrowed from twice last year, without asking, had a silent clause in its operating agreement. A clause Everett had inserted in 2019. The entire structure of it, every moving part, was contingent on my active participation. I was no longer participating. Everett called Friday afternoon. His attorney reached out. Urgent meeting request. The stake. The account suspension. A pause. What do you want me to tell them? I thought about it for a moment. Tell them I'm unavailable this week, I said, but that I wish Sloan well. Everett was quiet for a beat. Then, done. I laughed. The first real one in days, the kind that starts in your chest and arrives at your face without asking permission. Corrine would have loved Everett. Saturday morning. A knock on room 1104. Marcus was standing in the doorway with 2 coffees from the diner on High Street, the old place I used to take all 4 kids on Saturday mornings when they were small, back when the table needed both leaves to fit everyone. He looked more like me than any of the others. Same build, same way of standing in a doorway like he isn't sure he's been invited even when he has. "You didn't have to come," I said. "I know," he said. We sat on the edges of the 2 hotel beds, him on one, me on the other, and drank our coffees without talking for a while. That's the Drake way. Corrine used to find it unnerving until she understood that it wasn't awkwardness. It's how we talk about the things that actually matter, with space around them, with time to mean what we say. Finally, Marcus set down his cup and said without looking at me, "She called me, about a year ago." He turned the cup in his hands, told me you'd said things about me, that I was the difficult one, the disappointment. He looked up. I almost believed her, Dad. The best lies rhyme with your existing fears. That's how it works. You don't invent something from nothing. You find the doubt that already lives in a person and make it slightly louder. You give their worst fear a voice and tell them it came from someone they trusted. I never said any of that, I told him. I know that now. I reached into the nightstand drawer, took out the document Everett had couriered Thursday morning, set it on the bed between us. Marcus read it slowly. I watched him read it. When he looked up, his eyes were wet in the way of a man who is using every last piece of himself to not let it go further than that. "Dad, it's yours," I said. "Yours, your brother's, your sister's, equal shares." The way it always should have been. He didn't say anything. He nodded once. The nod of a man who has run out of words but needs to acknowledge that something real just happened between them. 3 miles away, in the house on the Bexley Street, Sloan had come downstairs that afternoon, stood at the kitchen table, looked at the envelope that had been sitting there for 4 days. He'd been walking past it every morning, every night, leaving his coffee cup beside it, moving around it without touching it, the way you move around something you aren't ready for. Saturday night, he finally picked it up. 4 pages, handwritten, hotel stationery, the kind with the Meridian House letterhead at the top in small, tasteful font. I'd been carrying blank pages from a Louisville business trip in my laptop bag for months. The way you carry something you know you're going to need eventually, and aren't sure when. I wrote Sloan the truth, all of it, in order, with dates. November 14th, 2 years ago, the first time Ilara told him I'd complained about their marriage to a neighbor on Elm Street, a woman named Patricia, apparently. I have never spoken to a woman named Patricia on Elm Street. I have never spoken to anyone on Elm Street about my son's marriage or anything else. I wrote that down with the date, the exact claim, and the name of the neighbor. February of the following year, when my daughter called Sloan in tears because she'd been told, by Ilara, through Sloan, that I'd said she was jealous of their lifestyle, that I'd called her difficult. My daughter and I had spoken on the phone 3 days before that call happened. We talked about her herb garden and a novel she was reading. I wrote that down. April, when Marcus stopped being invited to Sunday dinners without explanation, no conversation, no reason given. He called me once quietly and asked if he'd done something wrong. I didn't know what to tell him. I wrote that down too. July, the phone call, the kitchen window open, her voice clear as anything on the recording I made on the back porch of my own son's house. He's a senile old man bleeding Sloan dry. I'm handling it. I wrote that the recording existed. I wrote that copies were already at Everett's office and with each of his siblings. And then I wrote the part I'd been carrying longest. 3 weeks before Corinne died, in a Cincinnati hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and yellow flowers, she'd asked to be moved to the windowsill because the sweetness was too much from the bed. She took my hand. She wasn't afraid of dying. I need to say that clearly. My wife was one of the most clear-eyed people I've ever known. She'd made her peace with what was coming in a way I hadn't managed, and still haven't. Entirely. She looked at it straight and didn't flinch, but she was afraid of one thing. She held my hand and said in the quiet, direct voice she saved for things she needed me to actually hear. Not just acknowledge, but hear. Promise me you'll keep them together, Nolan. All 4 of them. No matter what happens after I'm gone, promise me. I promised her. I wrote Sloan that I had failed that promise. Not because I didn't try, because I chose silence when I should have chosen truth. I chose to preserve the peace in one room while the house came apart around me. I chose to wait and document and be patient. When the time for patience had passed a year before, I admitted it to myself. I wrote that the Corinne Drake Foundation, 200 acres of Ohio farmland, the Meridian stake, everything that should have been part of his inheritance, existed because his mother's name deserved better than to be used as collateral in someone else's private war. I wrote that I loved him. I wrote that love and tolerance are not the same thing. And I wrote at the bottom of the 4th page, in the same handwriting I'd used for 40 years of contracts and letters and birthday cards, "Do not call me until you understand the difference." Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Everett called. Sloane's attorney withdrew the urgent meeting request. I set down my coffee. Why? Because Sloane fired him. Last night, a pause. And this morning, Ilara moved out. The room went completely still. Say that again. She's at her sister's in Worthington. Left last night. Everett chose his next words with the care of a man who respects the weight of language. Apparently, the recording was a significant development in their household conversation. 2 suitcases, he told me. She left with 2 suitcases. I had left with that for a long time. Not triumph. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because it matters. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Something older and quieter and sadder than any of those things. The specific grief of a parent who has been right about something they desperately, genuinely wanted to be wrong about. The grief of watching something you tried to prevent come true anyway because you waited too long to say the thing that might have stopped it. She was never going to change. That was never the variable. I had always known that. The variable was Sloane, and Sloane needed to see it in his own time, in his own way, with the evidence in his own hands. That's what the 47 pages were for. Sunday afternoon, my daughter landed at John Glenn Airport. I met her in the Meridian House lobby. She came through the automatic doors with Corinne's posture, shoulders back, unhurried, like a woman who has decided to be exactly where she is. And when she saw me across the lobby, she didn't say anything, didn't wave, just walked straight to me and put her arms around me and held on. When she stepped back, she had Corinne's expression, the one that meant, I have things I want to say and I am choosing every word very carefully so I don't accidentally set something on fire. I should have called more, she said. So should I said. We left it exactly there. Drake family way, put the hard thing on the table and let it sit until it's ready to be picked up properly. We had dinner on High Street, real food. She ordered for both of us without asking, the way her mother used to, and I didn't say a single word about it. It was the best meal I'd had in 8 months. Monday morning, day 7, eggs, wheat toast, good orange juice. The hotel restaurant had started recognizing my order without asking. My phone rang. Not Everett. Sloane. I looked at his name on the screen for a long moment, longer than I needed to. Corinne's clock ticking on the nightstand upstairs, her voice in my memory from a hospital room, a promise I'd made and broken, and was still trying to keep. I answered. The voice on the other end was not the voice that had filled that kitchen 8 nights ago. That voice had been loud and sharp and rehearsed. The voice of a man delivering lines written by someone else. This voice was something different entirely. Hollow, stripped, the small voice of a person standing in a room where all the walls have come down at once and seeing, for the first time, how large the room actually is, and how alone they are inside it. Dad. A long pause. I read the letter. I know, I said. I didn't know about the phone calls. What she said to everyone. I didn't know about the recording. His voice broke on that last part, not performed breaking, the real kind. The kind that happens when something has finally reached past all the defenses and touched the actual person. Dad, I didn't know any of it. I know you didn't. And that is the most complicated truth in this entire story. Sloane wasn't a villain. That's not what this is. He was a good man who had been worked on, slowly, carefully, with tremendous patience, until he was facing entirely the wrong direction. He wasn't cruel by nature. He'd been made cruel by proximity, by 2 years of a voice in his ear revising his reality, one small, plausible increment at a time. Good men can be turned. That's what makes it so dangerous. I know you didn't, I said. I'm sorry. The words came out without strategy or architecture behind them. Just a son, all defenses gone, saying the only honest thing he had left. Dad, I'm so sorry. The clock ticked. I thought about Corrine, about a hospital room, about a promise. I thought about a diner on High Street and a table that needed 2 leaves and 4 kids arguing about nothing that mattered. I know, I said, but sorry is the beginning of something, Sloan. It's not the thing itself. What got torn down took a long time to tear down. It's going to take longer to rebuild. Silence on the line. Then, very quietly, without any drama at all, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Not about the money, not the foundation or the accounts or the stake or any of the legal architecture Everett had built before dawn on a Wednesday. Just tell me what to do. The most honest thing a person can say when they've lost something they didn't understand they had until the morning they reached for it and found nothing there. Call Marcus tonight, I said. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Then your brother in Portland. Then your sister. I paused. They answered at 6 a.m. when Everett called them. They'll answer for you. Okay. Then we'll talk. I did not promise him forgiveness on any particular timeline. I did not promise the foundation would reverse, or that the accounts would unfreeze, or that any of it would go back to the way it was before the night he stood in his kitchen and told me to pack my things. Those things weren't off the table, but they weren't the point. The point was simpler and harder than all of it. The same thing his mother had made me promise in a Cincinnati hospital room, that I would keep trying, that this family, fractured, humbled, finally honest with each other after 2 years of the opposite, was still worth keeping together. I hung up, set the phone beside my orange juice, looked out at Columbus through the restaurant window. Gray, cold, completely unbothered the way a good city is. Corrine, I thought. I think I kept the promise this time. Here's what I want to say before this story closes. I didn't leave that house at 5:30 in the morning to win something. I left because 63 years had taught me one thing that I know is true down to the bone. The truth doesn't disappear when you don't say it. It just gets heavier, and eventually the weight of it breaks something. Either you or everything standing near you. I chose everything near me. Elora is gone. That was her own doing, recorded in her own words on a day she thought she was alone. You can't manufacture an outcome like that. You can only make sure you're paying attention when it arrives. Sloan is rebuilding. Slowly. The Drake way. Too few words. Too much coffee. Long silences that mean more than the words would have anyway. It's not fixed. It may never be exactly what it was. But it's honest now, and honest is what it needed to be. Marcus and I have breakfast every other Saturday. Same diner. He orders the same thing every time. I stopped mentioning it after the 3rd week, and I'm not going to start again. My daughter calls on Thursdays. My son in Portland is coming for Christmas. His kids in tow, first time in 2 years. I already called the diner, asked them to have a table with 2 leaves ready. Corinne's clock is on the nightstand in room 1104. For now. That's the sweet part, I think, when I lie there at night and listen to it tick. Not the revenge. The return.